All right, there is some big breaking news going on. We've got crisis at the U.S. border. We've got a president whose son could be going to jail for 25 years. Will he actually go? We've got Democrats, mainstream media, the Justice Department going against Donald Trump. To help me understand all of it, I have Steve Cortes. Steve, thank you so much for joining me again.
Stephen, it is a pleasure to be back. I'm a big fan of your show, and so it's an honor to be here as a guest.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Just some quick background for those that don't know. You have helped President Trump during his presidential years, also running for election and re-election. You are somebody that he trusts and leans on, and you are doing a lot in the Hispanic and Latino community, which makes me so happy. But right now, the biggest story that's hitting the news is Hunter Biden being convicted of all 3 charges. He's using illegal drugs, sleeping with his sister-in-law, getting her addicted to drugs. He goes out, he buys a gun. She panics. She ditches it near a school. It looks really, really bad. What are your thoughts on his conviction, and will he actually serve time?
Well, look, let me say this first. It's yet another tawdry Biden tale, unfortunately. But here's the thing, and I might be a bit different from some of my political brethren on the right. I don't frankly care very much what Hunter Biden did, except for what he did on behalf of his father. And I think that's the important distinction here. The fact that he led a life, of ill repute is really not my business, and I don't think the business of Americans. But the fact that he was a bagman for his father, that he functioned effectively as the emissary of the Biden cartel to the most dangerous enemies of the United States in the entire world, to Beijing, to Moscow, to Kiev. The fact that he was that bagman, that very much matters to all Americans. And I think it's very relevant to all of us as citizens of this country. We know that most of those facts were hidden, unfortunately, during the 2020 election, even after the laptop, of course, became exposed. The corporate media, big tech, were able to fairly successfully hide that story. They did it largely with the help of a lot of former intelligence officials who just outright lied and claimed that it was Russian disinformation. They did it with tremendous help from Twitter, which was then run by Jack Dorsey, not kind of the free market of ideas that it is now under Elon Musk, with Facebook, which remains a place of incredible censorship, YouTube, all hiding that story. Had the American people fully known the reality of the laptop, and again, not as it relates, to the slimy tactics and slimy lifestyle of Hunter Biden, that probably turns a lot of people's stomach, and it should, but that's not relevant. What is relevant from the laptop, for example, was Hunter Biden talking very explicitly about the, quote, big guy being involved in these deals, and that is, of course, Joe Biden. So I take a different view of this, and I also believe that the Justice Department, because I have an incredibly cynical view of the DOJ in general, but particularly Biden's DOJ, I think they charged him with something relatively inconsequential, knowing that they could get a conviction on this, because it does seem that he's guilty of this crime. But again, inconsequential compared to the influence peddling crimes that he was committing. And he clearly was committing crimes, at the very least acting as an unregistered foreign agent. And our FARA laws, Foreign Agent Registration Act laws, are extremely strict in this country. If you're acting on behalf of a foreign country in the United States, you can do that. It's legal, but you must disclose that. You must register with the foreign government under FARA, and those laws are incredibly, incredibly strict. So instead of charging him with those much more serious crimes, and instead of, even more importantly than that, outside of Hunter, instead of trying to follow this trail of evidence and this audit trail to where it really should naturally lead, which is with the kingpin of the Biden cartel, Joe Biden, instead, I think for optics and for a bit of a show, they convicted Hunter Biden on something which, again, I believe is relatively inconsequential in the scheme of things. I also would just say this, and this is my advice to anyone out there who's involved in campaigns, whether it's the actual candidates themselves from the president on down or other people involved in campaigns. Focus on Joe Biden and his failings, not Hunter Biden. And I tried to do this a lot, actually, even in 2020, when we were doing our very best as part of the Trump campaign to get the word out about what was revealed via the Hunter laptop, is that, again, it's not about Hunter. It's what he reveals about Joe Biden. That's important. The last thing I would say on this, and I say this as a father of 4, I really think that it reflects terribly on Joe Biden's character that he was not just willing, but it seems actually very anxious to exploit his vulnerable son. I mean, imagine if you have a son who is dealing with the kinds of issues that Hunter was, and his father was well aware of it, wasn't hidden, right? Somebody who was an addict, who had all kinds of problems in his personal life. Any loving, protective father would say, I'm only going to focus on you and making you better. I'm not going to send you out into the world to deal with some of the most unsavory characters possible to cash in on the Biden name. But that's exactly what Joe Biden did. So corporate media wants us to believe this narrative that Joe Biden is somehow a loving father, that he's a decent human being, that he's a patriotic American. He is none of that. Okay, none of that. He's a scumbag. He's a terrible father, and he's somebody who sold out our country to the most dangerous enemies of the United States. And I hope if there's any benefit of this conviction, I hope that it will force people, will compel Americans to focus again where they should have probably been focusing in 2020, but will focus in 2024 on the miserable shortcomings of Joe Biden and his character.
Yeah. I have a copy of the Hunter Biden laptop right here in paper form. Mm-hmm. It is disgusting, but I agree with you. How does what he did relate to the president and vacuuming up money from all of these foreign countries, doing these deals in order to enrich the Biden family by tens of millions of dollars? They were all cashing in. Right. On the Biden name. It was the only thing they had to sell. There certainly wasn't any skill or talent. You don't get a $80,000 a month salary at an energy company having zero experience. So, and now Representative James Comer in the last couple days has referred Hunter Biden again and James Biden for criminal investigation. We'll see if anything comes out of that. What do you think might happen to those 51 intelligence agents that knowingly lied about the Hunter Biden laptop? I mean, we are right now dealing with Joseph Robinette Biden and his horrible policies in the White House because of these 51 liars. What do you think?
No, it's such an important point, Stephen. And remember this, that even for folks who take the official vote counts as valid in those crucial swing states, the total vote count differential was 43,000 votes. That's all it would have taken in a country of 330 million Americans. 43,000 votes switched in the crucial states of Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, which were, of course, the three closest states that went to Joe Biden. And Donald Trump is still the president of the United States, and he is still the boss of those intelligence officials, at least the ones who are still currently working for the intelligence community, which is obviously the opposite of what they wanted. And they were willing to brazenly publicly lie to the American people and claim that the laptop was Russian disinformation, which we knew a long time ago that it wasn't, but we know with certitude now. Why? Well, because the laptop itself was presented by the government, by the Department of Justice, as evidence in the trial against Hunter Biden. So think about that. The same national security apparatus, broadly, the DOJ is certainly part of that, certainly the FBI, part of the national security apparatuses of the United States. Those same apparatuses, the ruling class that controls those operations told us this is not legitimate. Now, just a few years later, they're saying it's so legitimate that it's worthy of being entered into evidence in a federal court proceeding. And to answer your question too, though, about what's going to happen to them, what will be the ramifications? Well, if Joe Biden wins again, nothing. Of course, nothing. Nothing happened to them before. These people have been Teflon in many ways. Remember, people used to talk about John Gotti. They used to call him the Teflon Don because at least for a while he was able to beat the case often against the feds. Well, these are gangsters of a different sort of the intelligence community in Washington, D.C., and they seem to so far be Teflon, meaning that nothing sticks to them. People like James Clapper. By the way, he didn't just lie back in 2020 when he made up a story that the laptop was Russian disinformation. He has lied as recently as this week when he was asked again. He was asked, do you regret that you made those statements? And he said no. And not only was he not punished for that despicable act of subterfuge and that lie that was spread to the American people, but he's been rewarded for it. He's been rewarded for it with cable news gigs, as has John Brennan. And by the way, these are people who themselves should have been put in cuffs. Clapper, for example, let me be specific about this. Clapper, under oath, before the American people in an open hearing before the United States Congress said that the NSA was not spying on Americans. Of course, because of the revelations of Edward Snowden, we know that was an absolute lie. Again, an abject lie under oath in front of the public, in front of the American people. There were no consequences at all for James Clapper. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. John Brennan, who I mentioned, very similarly, his CIA, when he was in charge of the CIA, they hacked the Senate Oversight Committee, our Senate Oversight Committee, not foreign countries. We want them to hack foreign countries. The United States Senate Oversight Committee, which had responsibility of oversight over his CIA. He denied the hacking, later had to admit it because he was caught red-handed and caught mostly by Democrats, I might add. Senator Rod Wyden from Oregon, who's hardly American first, not a Republican, not a conservative, was maybe the most outspoken on this issue. But again, Stephen, here's the important point. No consequences. Not only was he not fired, not prosecuted, in fact, he's been rewarded with book deals, with lucrative speeches, with contributorships at cable news gigs. I used to have those cable news contributorships. I know that they're a great gig. They're pretty easy. They pay really well. They bring a lot of prestige. They bring all kinds of ancillary benefits. But listen, I don't want to only sound dire about this, because here's the good. That's all the bad news. Okay, now the good news. If we elect Donald Trump, I believe that this time around, he understands far better than he did during his first term the consequences of not taking on the intelligence community. I think that during the first term, he was so inundated by the Russia lie, the Russian hoax, which was largely invented and pushed by that very intelligence community, that it was difficult for him to take them on and to try to cleanse the government, the deep state, the administrative state, the way he should have in the first term. I firmly believe that he approaches this second term, if and when he wins, and I believe he'll win, with an incredibly different resolve to truly go after these bad agents and these bad agencies. And so I think we'll have a very different result. And we may ultimately finally see some consequences. At the very least, these people, those 51 people, should lose their security clearances. It's an important point that I think a lot of regular civilians may not be aware of. After leaving those agencies, they maintain security clearances for years and years, sometimes for life. That's very valuable. A lot of companies out there, a lot of people of influence, organizations of influence, want to know that they can hire people as consultants, as speakers, and so forth, who have the highest level of security clearances. So it really matters. It's a very valuable asset to have on a person's resume after they leave government. At the very least, those clearances need to be stripped away. These people should have no access ever again to the secrets or information of the United States, because they're traitors to the United States. I mean, that's the reality here. They have largely been able to construct a parallel, unelected, unaccountable government that's done grave damage to the United States, and that has to end. And the mechanism that we get it to end, that we make this a reality instead of just complaining about it, is voting on November 5th. And by the way, voting before November 5th, if I can actually put in a plug for that, because a lot of our people love game day voting, and I understand why. But we want people to vote early. Vote early. Use the tactics, even if you don't like the rules that the left has constructed. And I don't like them. I think it should be game day in-person voting. But the fact is, it is not. That is not the rules of the game. It's not the rules of engagement for elections in 2024. So not just vote on November 5th, but actually, even preferable to that, vote before November 5th. Vote as soon as it is legal and allowed in your state, and get all of your fellow patriots to vote. And if we do that and we elect Donald Trump, that is a huge that will be a huge step forward toward this country, toward regaining control of our republic, which in many ways has devolved into an oligarchy.
Yes. People are worried about Trump becoming a revengeful tyrant. Of course, they're using these talking points to scare people from voting for him, but he wouldn't even have to waste taxpayer money dragging these people through court. He could literally just say, you lose your security clearance,
right?
And it would be a game changer. You have a documentary right now about the crisis at the border, the fact that the United States is being invaded. It's going viral. It's going super successful. I want my people to know about it. Tell us about the documentary.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephen. And thankfully, it is doing great. I'm going to credit that to the editors, not to the on-camera talent, although I hope I did okay myself as well. But listen, kidding aside, we went to the U.S.-Mexico border, and we went specifically in Cochise County, Arizona, because I thought it was important for us to show the country firsthand what is going on there. It's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to go there. And I study the border intensively. This is a huge, huge issue for me. I'm the son of an immigrant, so I care deeply about immigration, about legal immigration and doing it the right way for the United States. And it's an issue that I study probably more than any, except for economics. And I will tell you this, Stephen, even for me, somebody who studied it extensively, boy, did I learn a lot, and all of it terrible from going there, physically going there to the border. And I show this to the public in this documentary. It's only 18 minutes long. It's a short documentary. So we're not asking for a big investment of time. We're asking for no investment of money. It's free, of course, online. Go to my social media. You can find it there. It's doing great so far. I would even say it is, in fact, going viral. And I think it's because we present really compelling content that is quite frankly frightening about what's going on in the United States. And let me tell you some of the things that I learned that I don't think are widely known. One of them, for example, is that, and this was just, beyond irritating to me. Okay, this is maddening to me. There's technology there in Cochise County, technology at the border, and at the main border crossing there, the legal border crossing, there's actually pretty good walling that was constructed by both President Obama and by President Trump. And Stephen, attached to that walling is a lot of technology, a lot of cameras and lights and sensors, and it works really well. All paid for, all existing equipment, okay? When the Biden administration came in, and I didn't learn this until I went there, when the Biden administration came in, they literally hit the off switch. They turned off the existing technology. They don't want to use it. Again, it's paid for, it's installed, it's working. And they said, because of their radicalism and their recklessness and their dedication to their open borders globalist narrative, they said, yeah, we don't really want, let's turn the alarm off. Let's make it a little easier for the burglars to break into the United States. I mean, who in the world does that except people who only want ill for this country? That's not a liberal position. That's a leftist, Marxist, open borders, globalist position. And another thing I learned there that was really startling, particularly talking to the sheriff of Cochise County, is how much the cartels, the Mexican cartels, which are some of the most dangerous, deadly organizations on the planet, they've been massively enriched by Joe Biden's policies, because they used to basically just smuggle drugs across the U.S. border. Now they smuggle drugs and people. And smuggling people has become even more profitable for them than smuggling drugs. And by the way, their side of the border is under control. Now, it's criminal control, but the cartels do control their side of the border. And when I say control, meaning they're charging massive tolls effectively to these millions of migrants that Joe Biden is inviting into our country. So it's lawless on our side and out of control, but it's actually not on their side. It's lawless because it's criminals, but there is a control mechanism, and it's the Mexican cartels. Now, these cartels, which have become richer and more powerful than they ever were before, they are directly recruiting U.S. teenagers to act as their couriers, as effectively their drug and human smuggling mules. And they communicate with them. They're very sophisticated. They reach them on social media. They get on the apps that kids use, Snapchat and so forth. They know how to geofence and target and find kids. They particularly look for poor American kids, many of them in the Tucson area. They want kids who are younger than 18. Why? Because if they get caught, they're treated as juveniles. The criminal justice system isn't that harsh on them then. And they pay them, at least for a teenager, pretty exorbitant amounts of money. They'll pay them a few $1,000s. Hey, drive the car, drive mom's car a couple hours south from Tucson, pick up people and drugs. We're going to give you an address to take it back to. And according to the sheriff of Cochise County, he's arrested over 100 American minors, children, already. That's how many he's caught. Who knows how many he has not caught, who are directly dealing with some of the most dangerous terrorists on earth. And that's really who the Mexican cartels are. And by the way, listen, I'm not saying that these kids don't deserve some blame, of course, for what they're doing. I mean, of course they do. But the point is, as Americans, as parents, as patriots, it should worry the hell out of us that this is going on and that this is being facilitated at the U.S. border. To that point of the drugs as well, we reached a really sad milestone in the United States in 2021, over 100,000 overdose deaths nationwide that year. We have exceeded 100,000 every year since. We're going to do it again, sadly, this year. Most of those deaths are coming from opioids, and within opioids, a huge portion are coming from fentanyl. And this is also important. And I think, Stephen, we point this out in the documentary, but I think a lot of parents, grandparents out there who are concerned about young people may not know this, that A lot of young people are dying. They don't know that they're taking fentanyl. It's not like they woke up one day or went to a party and said, I'm going to do some fentanyl. Now, there is some of that for sure. And there are definitely hardcore fentanyl addicts, and they're suffering because of Biden's open border. But for many of these young people, for most of these young people, they think that they're doing a relatively safe drug. And what I mean by relatively safe is, for example, they think they're taking a prescription drug. Now, they shouldn't be doing that, obviously. Okay, they're doing something wrong, but that has been relatively harmless in the past, right? To take a prescription drug that you're not really authorized to take. But here's the problem: because it's coming from Mexico and because the cartels are awful people and they're sharp at business and they know how cheap fentanyl is, they put fentanyl in these tablets, in these substances, instead of whatever it's supposed to be, and American kids end up dead. And a college kid who doesn't have a drug habit, who's not a hardcore addict, who thinks they're doing something recreational, bam, drops dead. And this isn't rare. This is not rare, and it's happening all over the country. And it's facilitated by Joe Biden's open border. And that is simply the reality, and we expose it in the documentary. And not just expose it, we call people to action. If folks go and watch it on my Facebook page, for example, they'll see at the end a call to action to sign a petition to close the U.S. border. And part of that is because we want your information to know if you're registered to vote. And if you're not, especially if you live in one of these swing states, number one, we want to get you registered to vote. Number two, we're going to prod you and maybe kind of bug you once you're registered to vote and to vote early. And of course, it's not public information who you vote for, but it is public information whether or not you vote. And our opponents on the left, Stephen, have been much better at doing this, at ballot chasing, than we on the right have been. We've got a lot of catch up to do here. But my organization, League of American Workers, this documentary is all part of that effort. First of all, we want to win you over to our side philosophically. We want to win the hearts and minds of voters. But then secondly, that's not enough. We then also have to ballot chase, and we have to make sure that A, you're registered, that B, you've actually voted. And if we do that effectively, especially in places like Arizona, which is unfortunately, the front battle line of Biden's open border, if we do that effectively, we're going to win this election.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just came out in the last 72 hours. The GOP is suing because over 500,000 bad names are on their voter roll. Democrats are suing to keep them on there. Republicans are suing to take them off.
Right.
It's insanity. I'm going to put a direct link to your documentary down below. Thank you for making that free and available for my community. Final question for you. The Democrats have assumed that legal migrants would be on the side of illegal migrants. Oh, yes, come on in. I came in, but they're not. In fact, they're finding that most legal migrants are irritated. They're worried it's going to take their job. It's making inflation ridiculously expensive. Right. Just being associated with being a migrant, sometimes they're getting looked down upon. Right. And they're now saying, wait a minute, we actually support Donald Trump rounding up illegals, sending them out, and making them come back in legally. As you study this, or as you deal with the Hispanic, the Latino community, what kind of feedback are you hearing or receiving on this topic of legal versus illegal migrants?
Sure. Two entirely separate worlds. And Stephen, you're exactly correct. It's a media myth. It is a narrative, the idea that Hispanics are somehow soft on the border, or that legal immigrants to the United States are somehow pro-open border. In fact, in most cases, it's exactly the opposite. Quick personal story there. My own father immigrated legally to this country from Colombia. He first came here on a student visa, fell in love with America, fell in love with my mother, wanted to stay. For whatever reason, wasn't able to get a work visa to stay in the United States. He left. He then came back the minute he was able, literally the day that he was allowed back in, he came back. Married my mother, and sort of the rest is history. No more Colombia. 6 kids later, American citizen, and had a wonderful life here in the United States, and in many ways lived the American dream. I once asked him, he wasn't a particularly political guy, Stephen, but I once asked him, did you ever think of just staying? Because, of course, so many people do illegally. And he said, I would never do that. I would never disrespect this country that way. And he also told me, he said, it is so disrespectful to the legal immigrants who did it the right way, because it is a time-consuming, expensive, difficult process to become an American citizen. It is not easy. And because of that, the people who did it the right way They are some of the most offended, and legitimately so, the most offended people in America at the idea that these millions of people can simply make their own rules up to come into the United States at the invitation of Joe Biden. And here's the thing, too. I don't want to demonize the illegals because I think in some ways they're actually making a rational choice. Listen, if I'm a young man in a poor circumstance in Latin America and Joe Biden is telling me, not only can you come to the United States, but we're going to give you very generous benefits once you get here, I'm going to make that journey. Okay, that is a rational decision on their part. So I'm not even now. I want that young man gone because he doesn't belong here, but I understand the choice that he's making. The fault, though, really isn't on him. The fault is on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Mayorkas and the establishment Republicans who go along with this open borders nonsense. Because, again, it's not just that we're tolerating. It would be one thing if just, okay, we're having a hard time getting control of the border, but we're really trying. No, that is not what is happening here. This is volitional. This is a decision. This is a choice. When you turn off the technology, when you hit the off switch on the technology that is guarding the U.S.-Mexico border, you have made a choice that you want this country to be invaded by a mass human tsunami of trespassers. And why do they want that? And I point this out, excuse me, I point this out in the video. They want it because they believe they're going to win this election, and they are then going to amnesty these millions and millions of illegals that they invited into our country. And they then believe, and this is a logical assumption on their part, that if they do that, they will earn their votes for decades to come. Well, that's a nefarious plan. I know that's an incredibly cynical view of mine. I think it's accurate, but we can stop all of that. We can stop all of that at the ballot box. Again, early voting is going to be starting soon, but all the way through November 5th, we can stop that. We can regain American sovereignty, reclaim our street safety, our national security, our economic prosperity, make sure that American workers don't have to compete in the labor market against unlawful workers who bull rushed into this country, who broke and entered into the United States. So on so many different levels, it's key. There's a lot of important issues, of course, in this election, but I think this is the number one most decisive fulcrum issue that I believe is going to return Donald Trump to the White House.
Yeah, I agree with you. He is making such incredible inroads with migrants, with Black Americans, Hispanic Americans. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And I'm so happy, like fill the party with these amazing, hardworking people. I just love it. I wish my Spanish was good enough to put out videos in Spanish because I would do it. If someone would write it, I would do it in my very thick gringo accent. But thank you for everything you're doing. I'm going to put a direct link so people can go watch that documentary for free today. Keep doing what you're doing. I know that you are raising your voice. You are bringing in so many amazing Spanish-speaking, Latino, Hispanic Americans into the party. So God bless you for that and for making this movie. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, Steve Cortes. Thank you for coming on.
Stephen, thank you for everything. Keep fighting for this country. Thank you.
Thanks.